Stop exactly where you are. What is about to be revealed over the next 30 minutes will tear apart every doubt you have been carrying about whether you are truly winning this unseen war. This is no coincidence. Exactly 48 hours ago, something shifted in a way your enemies never imagined could happen. One of them broke down in front of everyone. This was not a normal emotional moment. This was a complete collapse. Just 3 months ago, that same person was fully convinced they had you contained, controlled, and unable to move beyond their reach. When they were confronted about what went wrong, their response hit like a shockwave. That person has already won. They just do not realize it yet. They were talking about you. In that instant, they understood something that will leave you stunned when it finally sinks in. While you were lying awake at night, questioning your progress, wondering if any of it mattered, doubting whether you would ever escape your current reality, they were meeting in secret, fixated on every move you made. Not because you might become a threat one day, but because they had already lost. Only now are they beginning to understand how deep that loss truly is. There is a brutal difference between thinking you are still trapped in an equal fight and realizing the war ended months ago and you walked away victorious without ever knowing you delivered the final blow. That difference is now showing up in the lives of those who once swore you would never rise. What is about to be revealed about how you overcame opposition without even trying is being intentionally hidden, so people like you never awaken to the level of power you already carry. Stay with this until the very end. You are about to see exactly what was done against you, why it failed so completely, the exact moment their downfall began, and how to accelerate your rise now that the biggest barriers have already been removed without you even noticing. Type 777 in the comments. If you've recently seen those who once came after you fall silent, fade out, or begin to collapse, and you're ready to understand why, return with me to a precise moment 11 months ago, a day marked in the unseen. 3 of those closest to the center of your resistance gathered, not in open hostility, but in secrecy. These were not enemies who confront you head-on. These were the dangerous ones. The ones who smiled warmly while cutting quietly. The ones who spoke encouragement while loosening the ground beneath your feet. They came together because something had unsettled them deeply. You were beginning to awaken, not in language or theory, but in motion. You were choosing differently. You were drawing lines where none existed before. You were saying no where you once complied. You were stepping away from manipulation you had mistaken for loyalty. This shift threatened everything they had built. Their entire structure relied on your sleep. It required you to live beneath stories that shrank your worth. Stories that were never authored by truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:32. And freedom was exactly what they could not afford you to touch. Their system functioned only if you remained beneath it, beneath your calling, beneath your capacity, beneath what you were chosen to carry. It required you to accept lesser ground, to stand in rooms too small, to doubt your voice while others fed on your labor and light without ever naming its value. The first voice to break the silence came from one who wore the mask of guidance but lived as a consumer. Someone who stood above you for years, not to lift you higher, but to climb. They had built their progress on your back while convincing you it was help. Their words cut through the room without apology. If they wake up fully, we lose access. We must control the narrative before they realize their true worth. Control the narrative. In other words, keep the mirror cracked so you never see yourself clearly. Keep you convinced that your strength is borrowed, that your independence is dangerous, that without them you will fail. They feared the moment you would remember, that you were never meant to orbit anyone else's approval. The second voice came from the professional sphere, one who benefited directly from your hesitation. Their concern was sharper now. You were beginning to ask questions, questions you were never meant to ask, questions that loosened the walls. If you continued, you would realize that many of the limits placed before you were inventions, not realities. They had told you certain heights were unreachable, not because they were, but because your ascent would expose their illusion of superiority. Now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. 2 Corinthians 3:17. Liberty threatens every false throne. Then came the third voice, stripped of subtlety, revealing the core of their strategy. We must keep their past failures alive. Each time you reach forward, drag yesterday behind you. Each time you dare to grow, remind them where they fell. Let memory become a cage. Let history speak louder than destiny. It was deliberate, a cold design meant to turn your own experiences into chains. But they forgot something ancient. Remember ye not the former things, neither consider the things of old. Isaiah 43:18. The past was never meant to be your master. From that place, they mapped a six-staged design. First, quiet separation from those who truly strengthened you. Not obvious severing, just distance. Second, the planting of negative voices, disguised as wisdom and realism. Third, silent interference when doors began to open. Fourth, the magnification of insecurity the moment confidence appeared. Fifth, the creation of crises, followed by presenting themselves as the only rescue. And finally, the endless repetition of the cycle, extracting value while leaving you depleted. They planned with precision. They committed with confidence. They had seen this work before. They believed you would be no different. They left that meeting certain that within months your spirit would be so diminished you would never attempt escape. But they misjudged one thing. They did not account for the seed already placed within you. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee. Jeremiah 15. What is known by heaven cannot be erased by shadow. What they called a plan was already unraveling the moment you began to stir. And the pressure you feel now is not evidence of failure. It is the sound of restraints loosening, the tremor before emergence, the moment just before remembrance becomes irreversible. But there was a flaw in their design, one so deep it sealed the outcome before it began, a miscalculation that made their collapse inevitable. They assumed you were ordinary, limited to human strength, exposed to the same rules they manipulate every day. They had no idea that just before they gathered to plan against you, something had already shifted the entire field. Not through strategy, not through foresight, but through a moment of raw exhaustion that carries more authority than calculation ever could. 3 weeks before their meeting, you reached the edge. You were worn down from standing alone, drained by the sense that everything was pressing against you at once. Tired of pouring out effort, loyalty, and excellence while receiving little in return. And in that moment, you did something rare for you. You stopped holding it together. You reached beyond people, beyond systems, beyond explanations. It wasn't structured, it wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't religious performance. It was the voice beneath the voice. The kind that rises when survival meets surrender. A breaking cry that sounded more like, I cannot carry this alone anymore. And that sound does not go unheard. Scripture has always known this moment. The righteous cry, and the Lord heareth, and delivereth them out of all their troubles. Psalm 34:17. That cry crossed thresholds you don't see. It reached levels where assignments are monitored, where destinies are weighed, where intervention is not casual, but precise. Something ancient responded, because that kind of desperation signals a soul standing at a turning point. When that signal is released, a protocol activates that is not available to everyone. Only when someone chosen for a specific purpose reaches a critical pressure point where interference would derail what must be fulfilled, and protection moved not as comfort, but as alignment. What was set in motion wasn't about easing your pain. It was about preserving your trajectory. You weren't covered because you are flawless. You weren't shielded because you never fail. You were guarded because your life carries weight, because your existence holds unfinished work that cannot be aborted. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. Psalm 91:11. That charge does not activate for vanity, it activates for assignment. So when those three designed their 6-stage plan, they were already late. What they believed was an attack strategy was in truth a mirror. Every move they initiated was intercepted before it reached you. Every attempt was disarmed before it could land. And every force they sent outward was turned back, multiplied, and returned to its source. Here is the irony that seals it all. They bound themselves to it. They made vows to follow through. They promised one another there would be no deviation, no retreat. In their effort to control you, they locked themselves into a path that could only end one way. They have digged a pit before me, into the midst whereof they are fallen themselves. Psalm 57:6. They thought they were acting freely. They didn't realize they were already entangled. What they called commitment was confinement. What they called unity was a trap. And what they believed would destroy you became the very mechanism that began undoing them piece by piece. You were never unprotected. You were never abandoned. And the pressure you survived wasn't meant to break you. It was the final confirmation that you were too significant to be left exposed. They were warned. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly enough that turning back was still possible. Signs came in forms easy to dismiss, yet heavy with meaning. One of them dreamed only days after their pact. In that dream, the entire scheme detonated in their hands. They saw themselves standing in the wreckage of what they had planned. They woke, drenched in sweat, heart racing, but told themselves it was nothing more than stress. They chose comfort over discernment and moved on. Another was cautioned by someone seasoned, someone who sees beneath surfaces. The words were simple. Be careful with that person. There's more there than you think. But pride filtered the message. They assumed it meant potential, ambition, competition. They never imagined it meant coverage. They never considered that what surrounded you was not visible to the eye. There are more with us than with him. 2 Kings 6:16. That truth was already active whether they recognized it or not. The third felt it in their body, a moment of sudden stillness while planning their next move against you. A chill that had no explanation. The sensation of being observed by something they couldn't see. They laughed it off. Coincidence, they said. Imagination. They silenced the signal and stepped forward anyway, and by doing so, they triggered a sequence already waiting to unfold. From that point on, everything moved against them while appearing ordinary. 11 months later, the pattern is undeniable. They weaken, you advance. Doors open where none should exist. Resistance dissolves without direct confrontation. What unfolded behind the scenes was not chaos, it was order. The first layer was redirection. Every attempt to block you activated a strange alignment of events. Whenever they interfered with an opportunity, something unexpected rerouted it back to you from a direction they could not reach. There was a moment months ago when one of them quietly prevented an introduction meant to connect you with someone influential. It looked clean, final, but 2 weeks later, you crossed paths with that same person in a setting no one could have engineered. No gatekeepers, no filters. The connection was natural, unforced, and far more powerful than the one they tried to stop. A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. Proverbs 16:9. What they blocked only delayed the meeting until it could no longer be corrupted. The second layer was return, not immediate, not theatrical, but exact. Every act sent toward you came back multiplied, disguised as consequence. One spoke against your name, and months later stood exposed by their own words. Another undermined your work, only to watch their own foundation crumble without explanation. One spread distortion, and time revealed truths that erased their credibility. Nothing looked supernatural, everything looked deserved. That is the most effective form of justice. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Galatians 6:7. The timing was too precise to ignore. The third layer was blindness, not physical but strategic. Their judgment began to fail at critical moments. They made decisions they believed were brilliant, only to discover later they were fatal. One chose to confront you publicly at what they believed was your weakest moment. They didn't know that exact day had been positioned. The audience was watching. Support rallied instantly. What was meant to humiliate you amplified your voice instead. The attack carried you further than silence ever could. He taketh the wise in their own craftiness. Job 5:13. Then came the most decisive layer of all, awakening. No matter how hard they tried to keep you small, something inside you refused to sleep again. Each time they dragged up your past, resolve rose instead of fear. Each attempt to isolate you only made room for stronger alliances. Each effort to fracture your confidence was answered by moments of unexpected validation, not flattery, confirmation. The kind that arrives without seeking it. The path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more into the perfect day. Proverbs 4:18. You are not simply resisting manipulation, you are being escorted forward. Counter moves were already in place before their intentions fully formed. What felt like recovery was actually alignment. What felt like healing was remembrance. You were never navigating this alone. And the reason their system failed is simple. It was never designed to overpower someone who was already being kept, guided, and steadily awakened into who they were always meant to be. Before we fully enter this prophetic stream, pause for a moment. Not for vanity, not for numbers, but as a prophetic act of agreement. I'm asking you to do 3 simple things, actions that may look ordinary, but carry spiritual weight. First, like this message. Each like is more than support. It helps this word reach those who are awakening right now, those whose breakthrough has already begun. Second, subscribe and stand with us. Not just to a channel, but to a growing prophetic community. As we're aiming for 5,000 subscribers, your connection helps raise voices of faith and ensures these messages continue reaching the ones they're meant for. Third, take a moment to write 999 or 777 in the comments and share your city and where you're listening from. Let this be a quiet but powerful sign between you and God, a declaration of fulfillment, alignment, and divine transformation. Lord, I am ready. I agree. Let your plan be accomplished in my life. Amen. There are 7 clear signs already speaking on your behalf, even if your conscious mind has not fully caught up yet. They are not dramatic announcements. They are internal shifts, quiet confirmations that something irreversible has already taken place. The first sign is an unexplainable calm in the middle of chaos. 6 months ago, certain situations would have shattered your emotional balance. Today, those same pressures barely reach your core. Not because you became numb, not because you stopped caring, but because you are no longer living at the level where constant turmoil can dominate you. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Isaiah 26:3. This peace is not denial, it is elevation. It signals that your inner foundation has been lifted beyond constant disturbance. The second sign is the way opportunities now arrive without desperation. You remember how every step forward once felt like a battle, how progress demanded strain, pleading, and exhaustion. Now movement feels different. People appear at the right moment, doors open without force. Resources align with less friction. You are not doing less. You are simply no longer pushing against resistance that was never meant to be permanent. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich, and he addeth no sorrow with it. Proverbs 10:22. What flows without sorrow carries confirmation. The third sign is the disappearance or collapse of opposition. Those who once fixated on you, criticized you, or worked against you have gone quiet. Others have unraveled publicly, not because you retaliated, not because you defended yourself, but because when protection is active, opposition exhausts itself. 4 months ago, one lost a position they held for over a decade. 2 months ago, another faced financial loss they cannot rationalize. Weeks ago, another admitted openly they no longer know who they are. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. Some weapons fail quietly, others turn inward. The fourth sign is clarity. There was a time when every choice felt heavy, when the future looked like fog and every direction seemed wrong. Lately, that haze has begun to lift. You are sensing next steps without panic. Decisions feel lighter, more natural. Not because you suddenly learned everything, but because confusion that was never yours has been removed. I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. Psalm 32:8. Guidance becomes audible when interference fades. The fifth sign is repositioning through people. You remember chasing attention, asking for chances, waiting to be noticed. Now something has shifted. Individuals with real influence, real capacity, real follow-through are drawn toward you. Not the ones who promise endlessly, the ones who act. This is not coincidence. This is placement. A man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him before great men. Proverbs 18:16. When the time is right, access no longer requires begging. The sixth sign is a steady confidence rising from within. Not loud, not performative, not arrogance. It is the quiet assurance that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Doubts that once paralyzed you now struggle to gain attention. They exist, but they no longer command you. You move forward anyway. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. A sound mind knows when to proceed without needing permission. The seventh sign is the one that seals it. When you look back now, the obstacles that once felt impossible appear smaller than you remember. Not because they weren't real, not because the pain was exaggerated, but because your position is changed. Mountains shrink when viewed from higher ground. Giants lose intimidation when you no longer see yourself as small. For the Lord your God is he that goeth with you to fight for you. Deuteronomy 24. Victory changes perspective before it changes circumstances. These signs are not promises of what will happen, they are evidence of what already has. You are not moving toward triumph. You are learning to recognize that you have been walking in it longer than you realized. If 5 of those 7 signs are already present in your life, then understand this clearly. You are not moving toward victory, you are standing inside it. The only thing catching up now is the rational mind updating itself to what your soul has known for some time. But turn your attention for a moment to those who moved against you, because what is unfolding in their lives now is so precise, so exact, it resembles judgment written line by line. The one who wore the mask of mentorship was the first to unravel. About 5 months ago, something began happening beyond their control. The very people they had used as steps started waking up at the same time. Not just you, all of them. Conversations began quietly, then spread. Stories were compared. Patterns emerged. They realized the same words had been spoken to each of them, the same promises of guidance, the same extraction of value without true investment. What had been hidden by isolation collapsed under shared awareness. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Luke 12:2. A reputation they spent decades constructing disintegrated in weeks. Doors that once opened effortlessly began to close. Respect evaporated. Invitations stopped. Influence dried up. And the cruel symmetry emerged. They began to feel what they had imposed on you for years. Working hard without acknowledgement. Standing alone without support. Pouring out effort without reward. But the difference is decisive. What refined you was undeserved pressure. What is breaking them is deserved exposure. Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues without right. Proverbs 16:8. The second from your professional circle experienced something quieter, but just as final. Their sense of superiority was built on guarded knowledge, techniques withheld, connections never shared, advantage preserved through limitation. But then the ground shifted, and unexpected change swept through the field. Systems evolved, old methods lost relevance overnight. The very expertise they clutched became obsolete. Meanwhile, the skills you cultivated naturally without manipulation suddenly became essential. They now watch in disbelief as you rise into relevance, while they fade into redundancy. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. Proverbs 3:35. Timing this exact cannot be random. The third collapse was the most visible. Just 48 hours ago, they broke in public. No planning, no control, in front of witnesses. Something gave way, and the truth spilled out. They confessed years of manipulation. They admitted sabotaging others they saw as threats. They acknowledged keeping people beneath them to feel powerful. No one forced them. The words escaped as if pulled from them. The mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. Proverbs 15:2. What they hid for years surfaced in minutes, and then they said your name. They admitted trying to destroy you, month after month of effort, every attempt failing, and now, standing amid their own collapse, they could see it clearly. You were advancing, you were flourishing, while they were unraveling. They said it felt as if the universe had already decided the outcome. But the universe did not decide. They did. The moment they chose to attack someone under higher protection, the result became inevitable. Touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm. Psalm 105:15. What unsettles them most is not just their fall, it is the contrast. They are falling while you are rising, at the same time, in the same season. They see alignment forming around you, as disorder consumes them. If everything were collapsing equally, they could blame circumstances, markets, timing, fate, but that excuse is unavailable. The divergence is too precise, too personal. They are forced to witness consequence and favor unfolding side by side, and that realization is unbearable, because deep down they know this is not chance, it is response. And the awareness that justice is not abstract but active is the final weight they cannot carry. What you are seeing now is not revenge, it is resolution. The closing of a chapter that was never meant to follow you into what comes next. So the question rises naturally. If the victory was already secured, why didn't you feel it? Why did it seem like you were still locked in a balanced struggle instead of standing on finished ground? The first reason is simple yet profound. You won without visible battles. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public showdown, no moment where you stood face to face with opposition and declared triumph. What defeated them never required your awareness. Protection intercepted what you never saw, like arrows stopped before they entered your sight. Danger was removed before fear could even form. The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them. Psalm 34:7. Deliverance happened quietly, and because you never saw the threat, you never felt rescued. The second reason rests in your nature. True humility has always been part of who you are. That humility is a strength. It is one of the reasons higher protection could trust you with authority without corruption. But it also carries a cost. It makes you slow to recognize your own value, slow to name your own victories. When alignment appeared, you called it coincidence. When doors opened, you called it luck. You did not see yourself as chosen, even while forces were moving on your behalf, because you refused to compromise integrity before. Honor is humility. Proverbs 15:33. Honor was already approaching, but humility kept you looking down instead of up. The third reason lives in conditioning. You were trained by experience to expect resistance. Years of effort without reward taught your nervous system that struggle is normal. So when pressure eased, your mind did not recognize peace. It anticipated impact. You mistook relief for the calm before another storm. You did not realize the storm had already passed, and the season had shifted. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. Psalm 126:5. Reaping feels unfamiliar when all you've known is sowing. The fourth reason is subtle. Your enemies were careful. They did not confront you openly where defense would have been possible. They worked quietly, blocked paths discreetly, whispered instead of shouted. Because the conflict stayed hidden, you assumed there was no conflict at all. But absence of visibility does not mean absence of warfare. Victory was achieved in layers you were never meant to manage consciously. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. Exodus 14:14. And you did. The fifth reason goes deeper than all the rest. Victory was concealed on purpose. The highest protective forces delayed your awareness until the right moment, not to withhold truth, but to protect you from knowing it too early. If 6 months ago you had been told the war was already over, pride might have risen before character had finished forming. Momentum might have stalled. Effort might have softened. So perception of struggle was allowed to remain, keeping you focused, refining discipline, deepening integrity. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. 1 Peter 5:6. Timing mattered. Now the foundation is firmly in place. Strength and humility are in balance. Knowledge can no longer distort who you are. That is why this realization is arriving at this exact moment, not earlier, not later. The timing is precise. What is awakening within you is not accidental. It is aligned. Truth is now reaching the mind because the soul has become strong enough to hold it without breaking. None of this is happening by chance. Not the timing, not the clarity, not the quiet sense that something has finally shifted within you. You are not finding victory for the first time. You are recalling it. And that remembrance is the final step before you move forward. No longer in battle, but building upon ground that was already secured long before you recognized it. Now that your awareness has aligned with truth, a new question naturally emerges. If the victory is already behind you, what comes next? The road ahead unfolds in distinct stages, each one building momentum, each one revealing that what was secured in silence is now ready to be seen. The first stage begins sooner than expected. Within the next 30 days, momentum increases. Opportunities begin to appear beyond what logic would anticipate. What once seemed like a long and difficult climb suddenly becomes shorter. Connections you thought would take years begin to form with ease. Resources that once felt out of reach begin to show up effortlessly. This is not because you suddenly became more capable. It is because the resistance that was never meant for you has been removed. Like someone who trained for years under heavy weight and then finally sets it down, you do not become faster overnight. You simply move freely. Every valley shall be lifted, and every mountain and hill brought low. Isaiah 44. The second stage begins to unfold within 90 days. People from your past begin to return. Not all of them, only those whose conscience has been stirred. They come back without pride. They come acknowledging that they misjudged you, minimized you, or benefited from your silence. Some will apologize sincerely, and here a decision shapes the next level. Forgiveness is not restoration of access. It is release of weight. It frees you, not them. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven. Luke 6:37. What you let go of no longer has authority over your future. The third stage emerges within 6 months. Recognition finds you, not shallow attention, not spectacle, but rightful acknowledgement in the places that matter. People of substance in your field begin to see you clearly. They respect your work. They seek your insight. Your presence carries weight because your results speak without explanation. No one will question whether you earned it. Evidence will answer before words are required. The gift maketh room. Proverbs 18:16. And now there is space. The fourth stage follows within a year. You stand in a position to help others walking through what once nearly broke you. Not as theory, not as distant advice, but as living proof. And when guidance comes from someone who has endured, survived, and emerged with humility intact, it carries authority that no institution can replicate. Comfort them which are in any trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted. 2 Corinthians 1:4. Your pain becomes purpose without losing its dignity. Then comes the fifth stage, around 18 months from now. Looking back, clarity replaces confusion. Every rejection reveals itself as protection. Every closed door exposes a better one that could not open until the old path ended. Every loss shows itself as space made for alignment. You see the design that was invisible while you were inside it. He hath made everything beautiful in his time. Ecclesiastes 3:11. Timing explains what pain never could, but this unfolding carries one condition. The very qualities that brought you here must remain intact. Humility that is real, not performative. Integrity that does not bend under reward. Compassion for those still struggling, even when you no longer are. growth amplifies character. If arrogance enters, resistance returns. If recognition corrupts, protection withdraws. If authority hardens your heart, progress reverses. To whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much be required. Luke 12:48. But if your heart stays clean as your capacity expands, there is no ceiling. What lies ahead is not merely success. It is alignment between who you are, why you were preserved, and what you are now ready to build on ground that was secured long before you understood how precious it truly was. So the question becomes clear. If the victory has already been secured in realms you couldn't see, are there ways to hasten its appearance in the visible world? There are, not by force, not by strain, but by alignment. These are not techniques to earn what you lack. They are practices that bring the outer world into agreement with what is already settled. The first strategy is precise gratitude, not general appreciation for life or vague thankfulness for blessings, but deliberate recognition of moments where protection intervened. A door that reopened unexpectedly, an obstacle that dissolved without confrontation, a decision that suddenly became clear when confusion surrounded you. Gratitude aimed at specific moments sharpens awareness, and awareness gives permission. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. When you name protection, you strengthen its voice. The second strategy is the complete release of the victim's story. As long as you describe yourself as someone wronged and waiting for justice, you keep one foot anchored in the past. The narrative must shift. You were not defeated, you were tested. You were not broken, you were refined. Language matters. Identity follows the words you use to frame your journey. As he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. Change the story, and the frequency changes with it. The third strategy is movement from victory before proof appears. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. Decisions change when you no longer act from fear of loss. Your voice changes when you no longer speak to be validated. Your pace changes when you know the outcome is secured, and timing is the only variable left. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. Substance comes before sight. The fourth strategy is service drawn from experience. Help those standing where you once stood. Share insight, support, resources, or time without calculation. Not to be seen, not to receive immediate return, but because it aligns with who you are becoming. Giving from sincerity activates return beyond logic. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure pressed down and shaken together. Luke 6:38. What flows outward with integrity returns multiplied. The fifth strategy is releasing draining connections without guilt. Some relationships were only meant to last for a season. If someone consistently consumes your energy, diminishes your clarity, or resists your growth, you're not obligated to carry them forward. Letting go is not cruelty. It is stewardship. Protection cannot operate fully while you keep doors open to those who undo what is being built. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Amos 3:3. Alignment matters. The sixth strategy is immediate recognition of small victories. Do not wait for monumental breakthroughs to acknowledge movement. Celebrate the conversation that went well, the idea that landed clearly, the moment peace replaced anxiety. Each recognition trains your perception to notice support instead of threat, and perception multiplies what it attends to. Despise not the day of small things. Zechariah 4:10. Small confirmations prepare the ground for large manifestations. These strategies do not create victory. They reveal it faster. They remove delay by removing resistance. And now, as awareness sharpens and alignment deepens, you approach the most confronting and satisfying realization of all. Not about your enemies, not about justice, but about what this entire journey was truly preparing you to understand. This is where the full reversal becomes undeniable. Return to that moment 11 months ago, when 3 people sat together and mapped out a 6-stage design to control and dismantle you. Every phase was intentional. Isolation, manipulation masked as concern, silent sabotage, the stirring of insecurity, presenting themselves as rescuers, locking the cycle so it would never end. Now look again, not at what they intended, but at what actually unfolded. The first stage was meant to isolate you from real support. Instead, it removed false closeness. The temporary loneliness you walked through cleared space for something far greater. You were drawn into a genuine tribe, people aligned in strength, clarity, and truth, not convenience. What they called isolation became purification. Every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. John 15:2. What was cut away was never meant to remain. The second stage tried to flood your mind with negative voices disguised as realism. Instead, discernment was sharpened inside you. Manipulation trained your perception. You learn to feel truth before it speaks, to sense distortion before it settles. What once confused you now reveals itself instantly. Deception lost its grip because you learned to see. But strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, to discern both good and evil. Hebrews 5:14. What was meant to weaken your judgment refined it. The third stage targeted your opportunities. Doors were blocked, paths interfered with, but none of it stopped movement. Each interruption rerouted you toward something cleaner, stronger, untouchable by their reach. What they sabotaged returned, upgraded. They grew tired trying to restrain momentum that was no longer dependent on them. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Proverbs 16:7. Resistance only redirected the flow. The fourth stage aimed straight at your insecurities. They pressed on old wounds. They stirred past failures. But instead of breaking you, it forced you to confront what had lingered in shadow. You faced it fully. And when fear is faced directly, it loses authority. What rose in its place was not bravado, but certainty. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Psalm 27:1. Pressure forged confidence that no opinion can dismantle. The fifth stage positioned them as saviors. They wanted dependence. They wanted you to believe you could not stand without their guidance. Instead, you reconnected with something deeper. Self-rust, inner authority, alignment with a source that does not abandon. Their assistance became irrelevant because you no longer needed rescuing. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Psalm 23:1. What they offered was a substitute for what you reclaimed. The sixth stage was designed to keep the cycle running forever, control without end. But this is where it shattered completely. The cords were cut. Interference ended. You stepped out of repetition and into freedom. While they remained trapped inside the weight of their own intentions, he brought them out of darkness and the shadow of death and brake their bands in sund. Psalm 107:14. You moved on. They could not. So the plan meant to destroy you became a six-stage elevation. Each attempt against you turned into a blessing in disguise. Every obstacle became leverage. Every attack strengthened what could not be shaken, and the cruel irony is this: they exhausted themselves, time, energy, strategy, all spent executing something that dismantled them while lifting you higher. They built their own ruin while believing they were engineering yours. This is not chance. This is reversal. This is justice moving with precision no human calculation can rival. This is what happens when someone targets a life that is kept, guided, and guarded beyond the visible realm. What they meant for harm was converted into momentum. What they planned in darkness became light for your path. And now, standing where you are, the truth is clear. You were never meant to survive this. You were meant to rise through it. Now the truth stands fully revealed, and it cannot be unseen. The nights you spent breaking, doubting, wondering whether you were moving forward at all, were never proof of weakness. They were sacred evidence. Evidence that something vast was pressing against you, because something vast lives within you. While you questioned your progress, the unseen war had already turned. While you feared stagnation, the outcome was sealed beyond time. Those who believed they controlled you were already standing on lost ground, unaware that the verdict had been written. What you are witnessing now is not a sudden victory. It is delayed awareness. Higher realms saw months ago what your mind is only now catching up to. Your enemies never held power. They held permission. An illusion allowed for seasons so growth could complete its work. And when the moment arrived, that illusion collapsed violently, leaving them exposed to a truth they were never prepared to face. They were never masters of the game. They were pieces moved by a hand they could not see. And now that same presence turns toward you, not to comfort you, but to awaken you. You did not survive by accident. You were not spared to return to small thinking or quiet living. The pain you endured, the collapse you survived, the trials that stripped you bare were not punishments. They were confirmations, markers, proof that you carry something that required pressure to be revealed. We are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. 2 Corinthians 4:8. What did not destroy you was never meant to. Victory is not waiting somewhere ahead. It exists now, unfolding layer by layer as your consciousness becomes strong enough to hold it without distortion. And if something in this message resonated before it made sense, if it felt familiar before it felt logical, that is because your soul recognized what your mind resisted. The time for merely enduring is over. The time for walking as one barely surviving has ended. You are being led, marked, positioned, not for comfort, but for movement, not for safety, but for purpose. The ground beneath you is shifting because you are meant to advance, not observe. And what rises next will require action aligned with what you now know. Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Isaiah 61. This is not an ending. It is the moment the door unlocks, the light spills through the crack, and you realize the silence ahead is not emptiness, but the breath before everything begins. Source beyond sight and beyond time. I stand at the threshold you have opened. I acknowledge the fire that refined me, the nights that stripped me, the weight that did not crush me but carved capacity within me. I came to understand that I was held together when I could no longer hold myself, directed when I had no clarity, and strengthened when my voice could no longer rise. Align my path with what has already been established. Refine my awareness so I can recognize the doors set before me, and give me the boldness to step through them without hesitation. Strip away every trace of fear, delay, and false humility that tries to pull me back from what has been placed in my care. Let my integrity remain intact as my influence expands, and let compassion continue to guide me as responsibility grows. Bring my work into alignment at the right time, elevate what reflects truth, and quiet anything that pulls me away from purpose. I choose to move forward, alert, grounded, and faithful to the calling that has been upon my life since the beginning. I step into what is unfolding now, not as someone asking, but as someone responding. Chosen one. If this message reached you, if it encouraged you, if it stirred something within you, your response carries more weight than you think. Take a moment to go to the comments and write 999 or 777 and share your city and where you are listening from. Let it be a quiet declaration that you are aligned with what is unfolding in your life right now. If you have not subscribed yet, stay connected, not just to a channel, but to a growing community of faith. As we move toward 5,000 subscribers, your presence helps this message reach those who are ready to receive it. No act of support is ever too small. Even the simplest gesture can bring hope to someone who truly needs it. Your support allows this message to travel farther than any one of us could carry it alone. Thank you for standing firm in this moment. Your purity is guarded, your spirit is rising, your path is opening, and you are never alone. Amen.